It's cold open time. The dreams that are only dreams. Preface. This to be love, that your spirit to live in a natural holiness with the beloved, and your bodies to be a sweet and natural delight that shall be never lost of a lovely mystery, and shame to be unborn, and all things to go wholesome and proper, out of an utter greatness of understanding, and the man to be an hero, and a child before the woman, and the woman to be an holy light of the spirit, and an utter companion, and in the same time a glad possession unto the man, and this doth be human love. For this to be the especial glory of love, that it doth make unto all sweetness and greatness, and doth be a fire burning all littleness. So that did all in this world to have met the beloved, then did wantonness be dead, and there to grow gladness and charity dancing in the years. Hello everyone, I'm Sam and you are listening to Literacy, where in a bit we'll be getting on with some more of that, but not just yet. That was the start of The Nightland by Hope Hodgson. You're not sure it counts as a cold open if you preface it with "It's cold open time"? Well, we can discuss that in some other time. Whatever. Lama, just before I started, I saw you say you slept all day and you think you're coming down with something, and as a result, you do not know what day we are or where you are, what day it is or where you are. Good luck, you've come to the right stream. This is definitely not something you want to ingest in that state. Keep thinking it's Wednesday because that's when Literacy, but no, it's a Saturday kind. Yeah, I've had a little bit of that this week. I think I'm slowly catching up to what day it is. I'm sort of half feeling like today is a Sunday, but no, it is a Saturday and tomorrow is a Sunday. But yes, hi, hello, welcome in. And yeah, the plan for this evening is to read the first two chapters of The Nightland, complete and unabridged by Hope Hodgson. The complete and unabridged is seemingly important because that's the copy that I've got. It seems like it is one that has been there have been multiple editions of it, which have been considerably less complete and fairly more abridged. Sorry. It's maybe even bridged. Who knows? Including I think it's got an introduction by Anne Vandermeer, which I've read, and I think she even mentions a version, like basically someone in recent years, yes, abridged. McGonagall, that's the one. William Topaz McGonagall, Billy McGonagall. Yeah, he had no, he didn't. I can't. I've biffed it. No, anyway, forget that. Yeah, I think she mentions like a recent writer attempted like a reworking of it or something. It's, and like Hodgson himself also like rewrote it. So like it's, we may be in for a journey. We may be in for a bit of a weird journey. It honestly, it might be boring. I don't know. Like, it sounds like Hodgson wrote the story he wanted to write. And he himself, she says, he described it as his masterpiece. And it was published in 1912. And it was also his last novel because he died young. But yeah, it's like I can't really go into the discussion now until we started reading it. But what I had said on the Discord is that I am, because like I've only read what I'll be reading on stream tonight, but it's sort of intimidating to go into something like this. It's, I think, if I finish it, it will be like the longest book that I have read on stream, which is already quite a hefty commitment. And because I don't know, I'm sort of a little bit apprehensive about, frankly, apprehensive about reading something that could be boring or just way too abstract and difficult to follow. So, if nothing else, C.S. Lewis thought it was smutty and that interests you. Yeah, I don't know what to make of that, because again, I haven't read the book. So I don't know whether that means it is, or whether it's just like, I mean, the logical answer would be C.S. Lewis is hella repressed, and so this book probably mentions, like, chaste holding of hands, and he's like, well, that's far too much, and snapped it shut. But, yeah, it's because of the size of the book, and just what an unknown territory it is. Like, it seems impossible to... It's not like a couple of people on Goodreads dinged it for being a little bit weird and a little bit boring. It seems this is a book that comes with its own, like, caveat leaflet saying, just so you're aware, you might not enjoy this one. And all this is to say that I am sort of open to the possibility of getting a couple of streams into this and just, like, gauging the mood. I don't want to do a poll. I don't want to, like, poll viewers of, like, should I keep reading this or not? Because then that gives you a hard number. And then people go, well, 5 people said yes, carry on, but 6 people said no, you have to stop. So why are you still reading this? And like, well, what about the 5 people that liked it? But what I want to do is... You're in the middle of Ulysses. You're also reading House of Leaves. Good luck. Yeah, but I think I am open to the idea of, like, gauging how we're all doing. And frankly, even myself. I don't... Again, it feels like a bad foot to start on with, like, hey, I'm going to start this book. We might not like it, so I might not get through it. But also, yeah, I wouldn't want anyone to just feel like... oh, we're locked into this for the next year, so great, I'm going to check out. Like, I'm open to thoughts and feedback. Ever said you make good decisions? No, that's fair. Yeah. But yeah, I think that's the main thing. I have changed one expression, because just a way that some... Yeah, I don't know. It's not like racist, which is the usual thing that gets changed. It's more to do with, and I guess, a little bit of a content warning, to do with, like, words to do with sexual assault. And I didn't particularly want to, like, jump scare everyone with this expression. It was one that I googled and was like, Google is not helping me, because Google is doing the thing of, like, oh, firstly it's like, oh, you're putting stuff into Google that's going to be logged and held against your account. It's like, no, I just want to know what this expression means in a sort of historical context, why someone would say that and describe people as that in that way. And instead Google was doing the, I think you're searching for this other thing instead, so I'm going to, like, change the words around and give you a whole bunch of information on the wrong thing. And I'm like, I don't want to dig this hole, so I'm just going to assume it means what I think it means, and I'm going to change the word to villains, because that's just, I don't know, something. It doesn't seem hugely relevant to the scene as being described or the plot, so I think I'm safe to make that call, even though the word I've chosen doesn't exactly fit. If we want to discuss that a bit more later, we can do that, but I thought I would just, almost like a non-content warning, I guess. Do we have text? Yeah, so that, I guess, brings us back around to the complete and unabridged. I have a text that is from Gutenberg, but I do not know if this is the exact same text that I'm reading. And also, unfortunately, it does not come with chapter links. So this might be a fun one. So I apologize, because on YouTube, what I try to do sometimes when I have extra time is to link with the timestamps to the chapters in the book. So like you go to chapter 3 and you can click on the link and it will take you to chapter 3 in the book. But I cannot do that. Control F in a few words will almost always find a place. Yes, that's the the poor man's hypertext. Yeah, so I guess there you go. That's what you do if you're trying to find where we're starting from. Just listen for the first few words of the chapter, hit Control F, and type those in, and it should take you to the right place. Assuming that is also the complete and unabridged text on Gutenberg. It doesn't say. I am hoping so. Yeah. I don't know if I have anything else to say. Have I done anything else this week? Anything else happened? I've added more books to my books to read pile, which includes this, and also Rendezvous with Rama by Arthur C. Clarke, which is one I've been feeling like rereading. I read it years ago when I was a kid. I say kid, I would have been a teenager. And I guess I'm on a little bit of a, like, unimaginably big, weird structures that are designed with an intent and a purpose, but not for humans and not for human habitation. That kind of a vibe. It's hyper-specific, I guess, but again, it's sort of brought on a little bit by House of Leaves and a couple other like things. There's some sort of free game I've been playing called Naissance, which has crystallized some of those thoughts about the kinds of spaces like that I enjoy. Of just like they're big and they're not built by humans and not intended, as far as we can tell, for humans, and we're really just trying to figure out what kind of being designs a space like this and what sort of purpose it occupies. I find that whole space fascinating, and I immediately lose interest. Should read We Used to Live Here. Has that been recommended before? That rings a bell. It probably has, and I've probably forgotten to look it up. I find that space fascinating, and I immediately lose interest as soon as I see like a table and a chair and a bed. As soon as it's like, oh, that's a person room, then like great, then it's just big people space. That's an apartment block. That's a bedroom. That's a kitchen. Then I like show me something that I can't comprehend, or can't comprehend easily. It's why I just gonna jump to Mass Effect. The Citadel in Mass Effect, the way they describe that as just, we found this big structure in space. We don't know who built it. We don't know what purpose it was originally intended for, but we found that we could just like occupy these spaces. So we set up like shops and living spaces in here, and we built onto it, but it's also not really a space designed with like human or humanoid occupation in mind. And I don't think they exactly nail the feeling of that 100%, because some of it still feels kind of like this is for people. But I like that premise. I like, yeah, we found this. It wasn't for us, and we can see that it's not for us. Like, we guess this is a doorway, but it's not a doorway that is designed for people like us. And this room wouldn't make any sense here. Like, there's weird spaces interest me. Cat vibes. Yeah, you know what? Yeah, I'll give it that. Yep, that's allowed. We can go with cat vibes. This space isn't for me, but I'm going to make it fit. Yeah. But on a grander scale. Yeah, speaking of I've had a box that I left on my bed for the purpose of cats to go in. And it is not designed for cats, but they've slowly been making it fit to their shape by, like, lying in it and pressing down the sides and working on it. And, you know, I feel like it's a little bit of a game for the cats. Checking my mute button. While I make myself comfy and reposition the mic. Thank you, Michael. Water. I guess if we're ready, we can start. if we're all good and comfortable and ready to go on a journey, then let us begin. The Nightland by William Hope Hodgson. Chapter 1. Mirdath the Beautiful. And I cannot touch her face, and I cannot touch her hair, and I kneel to empty shadows, just memories of her grace, and her voice sings in the winds, and in the sobs of dawn, and among the flowers at night, and from the brooks at sunrise, and from the sea at sunset, and I answer with vain callings. It was the joy of the sunset that brought us to speech. I was gone a long way from my house, walking lonely-wise, and stopping often that I viewed the piling upward of the battlements of evening, and to feel the dear and strange gathering of the dusk come over all the world about me. The last time that I paused, I was truly lost in a solemn joy of the glory of the coming night, and maybe I laughed a little in my throat, standing there alone in the midst of the dusk upon the world. And lo, my content was answered out of the trees that bounded the country road upon my right, and it was so as that excuse me, just choking on my words, and it was so as that someone had said, and thou also, in glad understanding, that I laughed again a little in my throat, as though I had only a half believing that any true human did answer my laugh, but rather some sweet delusion or spirit that was tuned to my mood. But she spoke, and called me by name, and when I had gone to the side of the road, that I should see her somewhat, and discover whether I knew her, I saw that she was surely that lady, who for her beauty was known through all the sweet county of Kent as Lady Mirdath the Beautiful, and a near neighbour to me, for the estates of her guardian abounded upon mine. Yet until that time I had never met her, for I had been so oft and long abroad, and so much given to my studies and my exercises when at home, that I had no further knowledge of her than rumour gave to me odd times. And for the rest I was well content. For as I have given hint, my books held me, and likewise my exercises. For I was always an athlete, and never met the man so quick or so strong as I did be, save in some fiction of a tale, or in the mouth of a boaster. Now I stood instantly with my hat in my hand, and answered her gentle bantering so well as I might, the while that I peered intent and wondering at her through the gloom. For truly rumour had told no tale to equal the beauty of this strange maid, who now stood jesting with so sweet a spirit, and claiming kinship of cousinhood with me, as was truth, now that I did wake to think. And truly she made no ado, but named me Frank by my lad's name, and gave laughter and right to me her name, and right to me to name her Mirdath, and nothing less or more, at that time. And she bid me then to come up through the hedge, and make use of a gap that was her own especial secret, as she confessed, when she took odd leave with her maid to some country frolic, dressed as village maids, but not to deceive many, as I dare believe. And I came up through the gap in the hedge, and stood beside her, and tall she seemed to me when I looked up at her, and tall she was in truth, but indeed I was a great head taller, and she invited me then to walk with her to the house, that I meet her guardian, and give word to my sorrow that I had so long neglected to make a call upon them. And truly her eyes to shine with mischief and delight, as she named me so for my amiss. But, indeed, she grew sober in a moment, and she set up her finger to me to hush, as that she heard somewhat in the wood that lay all the way upon our right. And indeed something I heard too, for there was surely a rustling of the leaves, and anon a dead twig cracked with a sound clear and sharp in the stillness. And immediately there came 3 men running out of the wood at me, and I called to them sharply to keep off or beware of harm, and I put the maid to my back with my left hand, and had my oak staff ready for my use. But the 3 men gave out no word of reply, but ran in at me, and I saw somewhat of the gleam of knives, and at that I moved very glad and brisk to the attack, and behind me there went shrill and sweet the call of a silver whistle, for the maid was whistling for her dogs, and maybe the call was also a signal to the men-servants of her house. Yet truly there was no use in help that was yet to come, for the need did be then and instant, and I nowise loath to use my strength before my sweet cousin. And I stepped forward, briskly, as I have told, and the end of my staff I drove into the body of the leftward man, so that he dropped like a dead man. And I hit very sharply at the head of another, and surely cracked it for him, for he made instantly upon the earth. But the 3rd man I met with my fist, and neither had he any great need of a second blow, but went instant to join his companions, and the fight thus to have ended before it was even proper begun, and I laughing a little with a proper pride, to know the bewilderment that I perceived in the way that the Lady Mirdath, my cousin, stood and regarded me through the dusk of the hushed even. But, indeed, there was no time left to us before there came bounding up 3 great boarhounds that had been loosed to her whistle, and she had some ado to keep the brutes off me, and I then to beat them off the men upon the earth, lest they maul them as they lay. And directly there was a noise of men shouting, and the light of lanterns in the night, and the footmen of the house to come running with lanterns and cudgels, and knew not whether to deal with me or not in the first moment, even as the dogs. But when they saw the men upon the ground, and learned my name and saw me proper, they kept well their distance, and had no lack of respect. But, indeed, my sweet cousin to have the most of any. Only that she showed no intent to keep distance of me, but to have a new and deeper feeling of kinship than she at first had shown. And the men-servants asked what should be done with the footpads, seeing that they were now recovering. But indeed I left the matter, along with some silver, to the servants, and very sound justice they dealt out to the men, for I heard their cries a good while after we had gone away. Now, when we were come up to the hall, my cousin must take me in to her guardian, Sir Alfred Giles, an old man and venerable that I knew a little in passing, and because our estates abounded. And she praised me to my face, yet quaintly wise, and the old man, her guardian, thanked me most honourably with a nice curtsy, so that I was a welcome house friend from that time onward. And I stayed all that evening and dined, and afterward went out again into the home grounds with the Lady Meerdath, and she more friendly to me than ever any woman had been, and seemed to me as that she had known me always. And truly I had the same feeling in my heart towards her, for it was, somehow, as though we knew each the way and turn of the other, and had a constant delight to find this thing and that thing to be in common. But no surprise, save that so pleasant a truth had so natural a discovery. And one thing there was that I perceived held the Lady Meerdath all that dear forenight, and this was, indeed, the way that I had my pleasure so easy with the 3 footpads. And she asked me plainly whether I was not truly very strong. And when I laughed with young and natural pride, she caught my arm suddenly to discover for herself how strong I might be. And surely she loosed it even the more sudden, and with a little gasping of astonishment, because it was so great and hard. And afterward she walked by me very silent and seeming thoughtful, but she went never any great way off from me. And truly, if the Lady Meerdath had a strange pleasure in my strength, I had likewise a constant wonder and marvel in her beauty, that had shone but the more lovely in the candle-light at dinner. But there were further delights to me in the days that came, for I had happiness in the way that she had pleasure of the mystery of the evening, and the glamour of night, and the joy of dawn, and all such like. And one evening, that I remember, as we wandered in the parklands, she began to say, half unthinking, that it was truly an elves' night. And she stopped herself immediately, as though she thought I should have no understanding. But, indeed, I was upon mine own familiar ground of inward delight, and I replied in a quaint and usual voice that the towers of sleep would grow that night, and I felt in my bones that it was a night to find the giant's tomb, or the tree of the great painted head, or— And surely I stopped very sudden, for she gripped me in that moment, and her hand shook as she held me. But when I would ask her what ailed, she bid me, very breathless, to say on, to say on. And, with a half-understanding, I told her that I had but meant to speak of the moon garden, that was an olden and happy fancy of mine. And in verity, when I said that, the Lady Meerdath cried out something in a strange, low voice, and brought me to a halt that she might face me. And she questioned me very earnest, and I answered just so earnest as she, for I was grown suddenly to an excitement, in that I perceived she knew also. And, in verity, she told me that she had knowledge, but had thought that she was alone in the world with her knowledge of that strange land of her dreams, and now to find that I also had travelled in those dear, strange dreamlands. And truly the marvel of it, as she to say time and oft. And again, as we walked, she gave out word that there was little wonder she had been urged to call me that night, as she saw me pause upon the road, though, indeed, she had learned of our cousinship before, having seen me go by on my horse pretty oft, and inquired concerning me, and mayhap daintily irked that I had so little heed of Lady Meerdath the Beautiful. But, indeed, I had thought of other matters, yet had been human enough, had I but met her proper before I see her. Now you must not think that I was not utter stirred by the wonder of this thing, that we had both a dreamful knowledge of the same matters, of which each had thought none other knew. Yet, when I questioned more, there was much that had been in my fancies that was foreign to her, and likewise much that had been familiar to her, that was of no meaning to me. But though there was this that brought a little regret to us, there would be, time and again, some new thing that one told, that the other knew and could finish the telling of, to the gladness and amazement of both. And so shall you picture us wandering and having constant speech, so that, hour by hour, we grew gladly aged in dear knowledge and sweet friendship of the other. And truly how the time passed I know not, but there came presently a hullabaloo, and the shouts of men's voices, and the baying of dogs, and the gleam of lanterns, so that I knew not what to think, until, very sudden, and with a sweet and strange little laughter, the Lady Mirdath, to perceive that we had missed the hours utter in our converse, so that her guardian, made uneasy because of the 3 footpads, had ordered a search, and we all that time a wander together in happy forgetfulness. And we turned homeward then, and came towards the lights, but indeed the dogs found us before we were come there, and they had grown to know me now, and leaped about me, barking very friendly, and so in a minute the men had discovered us, and we were gone back to tell Sir Giles that all was well. And this was the way of our meeting, and the growing of our acquaintance, and the beginning of my great love for Mirdath the Beautiful. Now from that time onward, evening by evening would I go a wander along the quiet and country road that led from my estate to the estate of Sir Giles, and always I went inward by the hedge gap, and oft I should find the Lady Mirdath walking in that part of the woods, but always with her great boarhounds about her, for I had begged that she do this thing for her sweet safety, and she to seem wishful to pleasure me, but truly to be just so oft utter perverse in divers matters, and to strive to plague me, as though she would discover how much I would endure and how far she might go to anger me. And, truly, well I remember how that one night, coming to the hedge gap, I saw 2 country maids come thence out from the woods of Sir Giles, but they were naught to me, and I would have gone upward through the gap as ever, only that, as they passed me, they curtsied, somewhat over-graceful for rough wenches, and I had a sudden thought, and came up to them to see them more anigh. And truly I thought the taller was surely the Lady Mirdath, but indeed I could not be sure, for when I asked who she did be, she only to simper and to curtsy again, and so was I very natural all in doubt, but yet sufficient in wonder, having some knowledge of the Lady Mirdath, to follow the wenches, the which I did. And they then, very speedy and sedate, as though I were some villain that they did well to be feared of alone at night, and so came at last to the village green, where a great dance was afoot with torches, and a wandering fiddler to set the tune, and ale in plenty. And the 2 to join the dance, and danced very hearty, but had only each other for a partner, and had a good care to avoid the torches. And by this I was pretty sure that they were truly the Lady Mirdath and her maid, and so I took chance, when they had danced somewhat my way, to step over to them, and ask boldly for a dance. But indeed the tall one answered, simpering, that she was promised, and immediately gave her hand to a great hulking farmer lout, and went round the green with him. And well punished she was for her waywardness, for she had all her skill to save her pretty feet from his loutish stampings, and very glad she was to meet the end of the dance. And I knew now for certainty that it was Mirdath the Beautiful, despite her plan of disguise, and the darkness of the wench's dress, and the footgear that marred her steps so great. And I walked across to her, and named her, whispering by name, and gave her plain word to be done of this unwisdom, and I would take her home. But she to turn from me, and she stamped her foot, and went again to the lout, and when she had suffered another dance with him, she bid him be her escort a part of the way, the which he was nothing loath of. And another lad that was mate to him went likewise, and in a moment, so soon as they were gone away from the lights of the torches, the rough hind lads made to set their arms about the waists of the 2 wenches, not wetting who they had for companions. And the Lady Mirdath was no longer able to endure, and cried out in her sudden fear and disgust, and struck the rough hind that embraced her so hard that he loosed her a moment, swearing great oaths. And directly he came back to her again, and had her in a moment to kiss her. And she, loathing him to the very death, beat him madly in the face with her hands. But to no end, only that I was close upon them. And in that moment she screamed my name aloud, and I caught the poor lout and hit him once, but not to harm him overmuch, yet to give him a long memory of me. And afterward I threw him into the side of the road. But the second hind, having heard my name, loosed from the tiring maid and ran for his life. And, indeed, my strength was known all about that part. And I caught Mirdath the Beautiful by her shoulders, and shook her very soundly in my anger. And afterward I sent the maid onward, and she, having no word from her mistress to stay, went forward a little, and in this fashion we came at last to the hedge gap, with the Lady Mirdath very hushed, but yet walking anigh to me, as that she had some secret pleasure of my nearness. And I led her through the gap, and to homeward, and so homeward to the hall, and there bid her good night at a side door that she held the key of. And truly she bid me good night in an utter quiet voice, and was almost as that she had no haste to be gone from me that night. Yet when I met her on the morrow she was full of a constant impudence to me, so that, having her alone to myself when the dusk was come, I asked her why she would never be done of her waywardness. Because that I ached to have companionship of her, and instead she denied my need. And at that she was at once very gentle, and full of a sweet and winsome understanding, and surely knew that I wished to be rested, for she brought out her harp, and played me dear olden melodies of our childhood days all that evening, and so had my love for her the more intent and glad. And she saw me that night to the hedge gap, having her 3 great boarhounds with her, to accompany her home again. But indeed I followed her afterwards, very silent, until I saw her safe into the hall, for I would not have her alone in the night, though she believed that I was then far away on the country road. And she walked with her dogs. One or another would run back to me to nose against me friendly-wise, but I sent them off again very quiet, and she had no knowledge of aught, for she to go singing a love-song quietly all the way home. But whether she loved me, I could not tell, though she had a nice affection for me. Now, on the following evening, I went somewhat early to the gap, and lo, who should be standing in the gap talking to the Lady Mirdath, but a very clever dressed man, that had the look of the court about him. And he, when I approached, made no way for me through the gap, but stood firm, and eyed me very insolent, so that I put out my hand, and lifted him from my way. And lo, the Lady Mirdath turned a bitterness of speech upon me that gave me an utter pain and astonishment, so that I was assured in a moment that she had no true love for me, or she had never striven so to put me to shame before the stranger, and named me uncouth and brutal to a smaller man. And indeed you shall perceive how I was in my heart in that moment. And I saw that there was some seeming of justice in what the Lady Mirdath said, but yet might the man have shown a better spirit. And moreover Mirdath the Beautiful had no true call to shame me, a true friend and cousin, before this stranger. Yet did I not stop to argue, but bowed very low to the Lady Mirdath, and afterward I bowed a little to the man and made apology, for, indeed, he was neither great nor strong made, and I had been better man to have shown courtesy to him, at least in the first. And so, having done justice to my own respect, I turned and went on, and left them to their happiness. Now, I walked then maybe 20 good miles before I came to my own home, for there was no rest in me all that night, or ever, because that I was grown deadly in love of Mirdath the Beautiful, and all my spirit and heart and body of me pained with the dreadful loss that I was come so sudden upon. And for a great week I had my walks in another direction, but in the end of that week I must take my walk along the olden way, that I might chance to have but a sight of my lady. And truly I had all sight that ever a man did need to put him in dread pain and jealousy. For, truly, as I came in view of the gap, there was the Lady Mirdath walking just without the borders of the great wood, and beside her there walked the clever-dressed man of the court, and she suffered his arm around her, so that I knew they were lovers, for the Lady Mirdath had no brothers nor any youthful menkin. Yet, when Mirdath saw me upon the road, she shamed in a moment to be so caught, for she put her lover's arm from about her, and bowed to me, a little changed of colour in the face, and I bowed very low, being but a young man myself, and so passed on, with my heart very dead in me. And as I went, I saw that her lover came again to her, and had his arm once more about her. And so maybe they looked after me, as I went very stiff and desperate. But indeed I looked not back on them, as you may think. And for a great month, then, I went not near to the gap, for my love raged in me, and I was hurt in my pride, and truly neither had a true justice been dealt to me by the Lady Mirdath. Yet in that month my love was 11 in me, and made slowly a sweetness and a tenderness, and an understanding that there was not in me before. And truly love and pain do shape the character of man. And in the end of that time I saw a little way into life, with an understanding heart, and began presently to take my walks again past the gap. But truly Mirdath the Beautiful was never to my sight, though one evening I thought she might be not a great way off, for one of her great boarhounds came out of the wood, and down into the road to nose against me, very friendly, as a dog oft doth with me. Yet though I waited a good time after the dog had left me, I had no sight of Mirdath, and so passed on again, with my heart heavy in me, but without bitterness, because of the understanding that was begun to grow in my heart. Now there passed 2 weary and lonely weeks, in which I grew sick to have knowledge of the beautiful maid, and truly in the end of that time I made a sudden resolving that I would go in through the gap, and come to the home grounds about the hall, and so maybe have some sight of her. And this resolving I had one evening, and I went out immediately, and came to the gap, and went in through the gap, and so by a long walking to the gardens about the hall. And truly, when I was come there, I saw a good light of lanterns and torches, and a great company of people dancing, and all dressed in quaint dress, so that I knew they had a festival for some cause. And there came suddenly a horrid dread into my heart that this might be the marriage dance of the Lady Mirdath. But indeed this was foolishness, for I had surely heard of the marriage, if there had been any. And truly in a moment I remembered that she was come 21 years of age on that day, and to the end of her wardship, and this surely to be festival in honour of the same. And a very bright and pretty matter it was to watch, save that I was so heavy in the heart with loneliness and longing. For the company was great and gay, and the lights plentiful, and set all about from the trees, and in leaf-made arbours about the great lawn, and a great table spread with eating matters, and silver and crystal, and great lamps of bronze and silver went all adown one end of the lawn, and the dance constant upon the other part. And surely the Lady Mirdath to step out of the dance, very lovely dressed, yet seeming to mine eyes a little pale in the looming of the lights. and she to wander to a seat to rest, and indeed in a moment there to be a dozen youths of the great families of the countryside in attendance about her, making talk and laughter, and each eager for her favour, and she very lovely in the midst of them, but yet, as I did think, lacking of somewhat, and a little pale seeming, as I have told. And her glance to go oddwise beyond the grouped men about her, so that I understood in a moment that her lover was not there, and she to be a lack in the heart for him. Yet why he was not there I could not suppose, save that he might have been called back to the court. And surely, as I watched the other young men about her, I burned with a fierce and miserable jealousy of them, so that I could near have stepped forth and plucked her out from among them, and had her to walk with me in the woods, as in the olden days, when she also had seemed near to love. But truly, what use to this? For it was not they who held her heart, as I saw plain. For I watched her with an eager and lonesome heart, and knew that it was one small man of the court that was lover to her, as I have told. And I went away again, and came not near to the gap for 3 great months, because that I could not bear the pain of my loss. But in the end of that time, my very pain to urge me to go, and to be worse than the pain of not going, so that I found myself one evening in the gap, peering very eager and shaken across the sward that lay between the gap and the woods, for this same place to be as an holy ground to me. For there was it that first I saw Meerdath the beautiful, and surely lost my heart to her in that one night. And a great time I stayed there in the gap, waiting and watching hopelessly. And lo, sudden there came something against me, touching my thigh very soft, and when I looked down, it was one of the boarhounds, so that my heart leaped, near frightened. For truly my lady was come somewhere nigh, as I did think. And as I waited, very hushed and watchful, yet with an utter beating heart, surely I heard a faint and low singing among the trees, so utter sad. And lo, it was Meerdath singing a broken love song, and a wander there in the dark, alone, save for her great dogs. And I harked, with strange pain in me, that she did be so in pain, and I ached to bring her ease, yet moved not, but was very still there in the gap, save that my being was all in turmoil. And presently, as I harked, there came a slim white figure out from among the trees, and the figure cried out something, and came to a quick pause, as I could see in the half-dark. And lo, in that moment there came a sudden and unreasoned hope into me, and I came up out of the gap, and was come to Meerdath in a moment, calling very low and passionate and eager, Meerdath, Meerdath, Meerdath. And this way I came to her, and her great dog that was with me, to bound beside me, in thought, mayhap, that it was some game. And when I came to the Lady Meerdath, I held out my hands to her, not knowing what I did, but only the telling of my heart that needed her so utter, and craved to ease her of pain. And lo, she put her arms to me, and came into mine arms with a little run. And there she bode weeping strangely, but yet with rest upon her, even as rest was come sudden and wondrous upon me. And sudden she moved in mine arms, and slipped her hands to me, very dear, and held her lips up to me like some sweet child, that I kiss her. But indeed she was also a true woman, and in honest and dear love of me. And this to be the way of our betrothal, and simple and wordless it was, yet sufficient only that there is no sufficiency in love. Now, presently, she loosed herself out of mine arms, and we walked homeward through the woods, very quiet and holding hands as children do. and I then in a while to ask her about the man of the court, and she laughed very sweet into the silence of the woods, but gave me no answer, save that I wait until we were come to the hall. And when we were come there, she took me into the great hall, and made a very dainty and impudent bow, mocking me, and so made me known to another lady who sat there upon her task of embroidering, which she did very demure, and as that she had also a dainty mischief lurking in her. And truly, the Lady Mirdath, never to be done of naughty laughter, that made her dearly breathless with delight, and to sway a little, and set the trembling of pretty sounds in her throat. And surely she must pull down the 2 great pistols from an arm-rack, that I fight a duel to the death with the lady of the embroidering, who held her face down over her work, and shook likewise in the wickedness of her laughter that she could not hide. And in the end, the lady of the embroidering looked up sudden into my face, and I then to see somewhat of the mischief in a moment, for she had the face of the man of the court suit that had been lover to Mirdath. And the Lady Mirdath then to explain to me how that Mistress Alison, which was her name, was a dear and bosom friend, and she it was that had been dressed in the court suit to play a prank for a wager with a certain young man who would be lover to her, and he might. And I then to come along, and so speedy to offence that truly I never saw her face plain, because that I was so utter jealous. And so the Lady Mirdath had been more justly in anger than I supposed, because that I had put hands upon her friend, as I have told. And this to be all of it, save that they had planned to punish me, and had met every evening at the Gap to play at lovers, perchance I should pass, so that I should have greater cause for my jealousy, and truly they to have a good revenge upon me, for I had suffered very great a long while because of it. Yet, as you do mind, when I came upon them, the Lady Mirdath had a half regret. That was very natural, because even then she was in love of me, as I of her. And because of this she drew away, as you shall remember, being, as she confessed, suddenly and strangely troubled, and to want me. But afterwards, as much set again to my punishment, because that I bowed so cold and went away, and indeed well I might. Yet, truly, all was safe ended now, and I utter thankful with a mad delight in the heart, so that I caught up Mirdath, and we danced very slow and stately around the great hall, the while that Mistress Alison whistled us a tune with her mouth, which she could very clever, as many other thing I wot. And each day, and all day after this gladness, Mirdath and I could never be apart, but must go a-wander always together here and there, in an unending joy of our togetherness. And in 1,000 things were we at one in delight. For we had both of us that nature which doth love the blue of eternity which gathers beyond the wings of the sunset, and the invisible sound of the starlight falling upon the world, and the quiet of grey evenings when the towers of sleep are builded unto the mystery of the dusk, and the solemn green of strange pastures in the moonlight, and the speech of the sycamore unto the beach, and the slow way of the sea when it doth mood, and the soft rustling of the night clouds. And likewise had we eyes to see the dancer of the sunset, casting her mighty robes so strange, and ears to know that there shakes a silent thunder over the face of dawn, and much else that we knew and saw and understood together in our utter joy. Now there happened to us about this time a certain adventure that came near to cause the death of Mirdath the Beautiful. For one day, as we wandered, as ever, like 2 children in our contentment, I made remark to Mirdath that there went only 2 of the great boarhounds with us, and she then told me that the third was to the kennels being sick. Yet scarce had she told me so much, ere she cried out something and pointed, and lo, I saw that the third hound came towards us at a run, yet very strange seeming in his going. And in a moment Mirdath cried out that the hound was mad, and truly I saw then that the brute slavering as he came running. And in a moment he was upon us, and made never a sound, but leaped at me in one instant of time, all before I had any thought of such intent. But surely my beautiful one had a dreadful love for me, for she cast herself at the dog to save me, calling to the other hounds, and she was bitten in a moment by the brute, as she strove to hold him off from me. But I to have him instant by the neck and the body, and break him, so that he died at once. And I cast him to the earth, and gave help to Mirdath, that I draw the poison from the wounds. And this I did so well as I might, despite that she would have me stop. And afterwards I took her into mine arms, and ran very fierce all the long and weary way to the hall, and with hot skewers I burned the wounds, so that when the doctor came, he to say I have saved her by my care, if indeed she to be saved. But truly she had saved me in any wise, as you shall think, so that I could never be done of honour to her. And she very pale, but yet to laugh at my fears, and to say that she soon to have her health, and the wounds healed very speedy. But indeed it was a long and bitter time before they were proper healed, and she so well as ever. Yet in time so it was, and an utter weight off my heart. And when Mirdath was grown full strong again, we set our wedding day. And well do I mind how she stood there in her bridal dress on that day, so slender and lovely as may love have stood in the dawn of life. And the beauty of her eyes that had such sober sweetness in them, despite the dear mischief of her nature, and the way of her little feet, and the loveliness of her hair, and the dainty rogue grace of her movements, and her mouth and enticement, as that a child and a woman smiled out of the one face, and this to be no more than but an hint of the loveliness of my beautiful one. And so we were married. Mirdath, my beautiful one, lay dying, and I had no power to hold death backward from such dread intent. In another room I heard the little wail of the child, and the wail of the child waked my wife back into this life, so that her hands fluttered white and desperately needful upon the coverlid. I kneeled beside my beautiful one, and reached out and took her hands very gentle into mine, but still they fluttered so needful, and she looked at me dumbly, but her eyes beseeching. Then I went out of the room, and called gently to the nurse, and the nurse brought in the child, wrapped very softly in a long white robe. And I saw the eyes of my beautiful one grow clearer with a strange, lovely light, and I beckoned to the nurse to bring the babe near. My wife moved her hands very weakly upon the coverlid, and I knew that she craved to touch her child, and I signed to the nurse, and took my child in mine arms, and the nurse went out from the room, and so we three were alone together. Then I sat very gentle upon the bed, and I held the babe near to my beautiful one, so that the wee cheek of the babe touched the white cheek of my dying wife, but the weight of the child I kept off from her. And presently I knew that Mirdath, my wife, strove dumbly to reach for the hands of the babe, and I turned the child more towards her, and slipped the hands of the child into the weak hands of my beautiful one, and I held the babe above my wife with an utter care, so that the eyes of my dying one looked into the young eyes of the child. And presently, in but a few moments of time, though it had been some ways an eternity, my beautiful one closed her eyes and lay very quiet. And I took away the child to the nurse, who stood beyond the door. And I closed the door, and came back to mine own, that we have those last instants alone together. And the hands of my wife lay very still and white, but presently they began to move softly and weakly, searching for somewhat. And I put out my great hands to her, and took her hands with an utter care, and so a little time passed. Then her eyes opened, quiet and grey, and a little dazed seeming, and she rolled her head on the pillow and saw me. And the pain of forgetfulness went out of her eyes, and she looked at me with a look that grew in strength, unto a sweetness of tenderness and full understanding. And I bent a little to her, and her eyes told me to take her into mine arms for those last minutes. Then I went very gentle upon the bed, and lifted her with an utter and tender care, so that she lay suddenly strangely restful against my breast. For love gave me skill to hold her, and love gave my beautiful one a sweetness of ease in that little time that was left to us. And so we twain were together, and love seemed that it had made a truce with death in the air about us, that we be undisturbed. For there came a drowse of rest upon my tense heart, that had known nothing but a dreadful pain through the weary hours. And I whispered my love silently to my beautiful one, and her eyes answered, and the strangely beautiful and terrible moments passed by into the hush of eternity. And suddenly, Mirdeth, my beautiful one, spoke, whispering something, and I stooped gently to hark, and mine own spoke again, and lo, it was to call me by the olden love name that had been mine through all the utter lovely months of our togetherness. And I began again to tell her of my love, that should pass beyond death, and lo, in that one moment of time, the light went out of her eyes. My beautiful one lay dead in mine arms. My beautiful one. That brings us to the end of the chapter, and where we shall take a break. So, yeah. That was chapter 1. Break time. Go, break time. But not for more than 5 minutes. And then I will see you back here in 5 minutes. Thank you for listening. Bye for now. And we are back. Hello, everyone. How are we doing? I hope you have had a good break. Or if you are listening on YouTube, you've probably skipped to where I start reading, which will be appropriately timestamped, I'm sure. Yeah. I think there will be some things we can discuss about the book at the end of the stream. I certainly have stuff that, like, has jumped out to me whilst reading it. Secret YouTube free section. Yes. Yeah, this is the bit that if you're just clicking the timestamps, you don't hear this. Because who wants to, like, it seems like I don't know what the right word for it is. It fastidious? Somebody define fastidious for me. So like timestamp the end of the break, and then who wants to listen to the bit, and then do like for when I start reading part 2. That just seems pointless. So fussy, yeah, okay, good, I got it right. Yeah, that's the one I was aiming for. It just no, why? Not necessary. So this is secret podcast for the people that don't click on timestamps. Hello, you made it through the break, and now you're here. Yeah, like, well, I think we can have an interesting discussion about this when we get to the end, but I don't want to like spend too long chatting about it right now because we've got another chapter to get through. But it's not a massively long chapter. So we'll do that, and then let's have a chat and see what we think about part 1 of the Nightland. But if we're all ready and we've all had a successful break, Joey is just fast asleep in his cube. He looks extremely cozy, just like a very, like, quite expensive plush child's toy that has just been kind of roughly stored. Just put that away. Thump. Oh, neat. Okay, now you're waking up a little bit because I'm talking about you. Okay. Please tell Joey we love him. Joey, chat loves you. They think you're adorable. I'm sure he would say thank you if he wasn't a cat. Missing half of the first hour of the book is not good for understanding what's happening. That is fair. I think, actually, if you're listening from now, you will probably be okay. That was... What you've missed so far is just your narrator setting up his relationship with this character, Mirdath, who... Again, not wanting to go deeper into the discussion, but it's like, does she have to be a cousin? Is this set in an era where I guess people were a bit more okay with that? But what if she wasn't like a blood relative? Unless you're just using cousin in like a different sense, in that like you're just literally your lands like border each other, and so therefore you are like related in that way, but not like blood relatives. Getting, yeah, I don't know. But that is really just setting up the relationship of cousin marriage is a long and time-honored tradition in most of the world and most of human history. To be fair, okay, then yeah, it's just me being a modern guy looking at that like, bleh. But yeah, I guess yes, it is a thing that's long ago happened. Listen back later anyway, so hopefully that'll help. Yeah, hey, it is primarily setting up your narrator's relationship with Mirdath the Beautiful, how he met her, how that went, and then how they ended up married, and then her unfortunate and frankly rather sudden death. Is like, haha, we're together. She died. Oh, hi. Joey coming out of his well to shame Samkind. Hello. What are you looking for? You hopping down, or do you want to go on my lap? You're hopping down. Right, you're going to want to leave the room, aren't you? Yeah, the first 10 minutes of Up, basically. This will not then be the next... How long's Up? 2 hours? 2 hours? 110 minutes of Up. It's not going to be that. Because... Are you all ready for a swerve? Because you're about to get hit with a swerve. As I just resettle myself back into a comfortable reading position. There. Let's see if I can adjust the angle of the microphone without breaking anything that costs money to replace. Good. Right. I am now ready to continue. I trust that you are too. Hello and welcome back in, YouTube timestamp clickers. Let us continue with The Nightland. Chapter 2. The Last Redoubt. Since Mirdath, my beautiful one, died and left me lonely in this world, I have suffered an anguish and an utter and dreadful pain of longing, such as truly no words shall ever tell. For, in truth, I that had all the world through her sweet love and companionship, and knew all the joy and gladness of life, have known such lonesome misery as doth stun me to think upon. Yet am I to my pen again. For, of late, a wondrous hope has grown in me, in that I have, at night in my sleep, walked into the future of this world, and seen strange things and utter marvels, and known once more the gladness of life. For I have learned the promise of the future, and have visited in my dreams those places where, in the womb of time, she and I shall come together, and part, and again come together, breaking asunder most drearily in pain, and again reuniting after strange ages, in a glad and mighty wonder. And this is the utter strange story of that which I have seen, and which truly I must set out, if the task be not too great, so that, in the setting out thereof, I may gain a little ease of the heart, and likewise, mayhap, give ease of hope to some other poor human, that doth suffer even as I have suffered so dreadful with longing for mine own that is dead. And some shall read and say that this thing was not, and some shall dispute with them, but to them all I say naught save, read. And having read that which I set down, then shall one and all have looks towards eternity with me, unto its very portals. And so to my telling. To me, in this last time of my visions, of which I would tell, it was not as if I dreamed, but, as it were, that I waked there into the dark, in the future of this world. And the sun had died, and for me thus newly waked into that future, to look back upon this, our present age, was to look back into dreams that my soul knew to be of reality, but which to those newly seeing eyes of mine appeared but as a far vision, strangely hallowed with peacefulness and light. Always, it seemed to me when I awaked into the future, into the everlasting night that lapped this world, that I saw, near to me, and girdling me all about, a blurred greyness. And presently this, the greyness, would clear and fade from about me even as a dusky cloud, and I would look out upon a world into darkness, lit here and there with strange sights. And with my waking into that future, I waked not to ignorance, but to a full knowledge of those things which lit the night land, even as a man wakes from sleep each morning, and knows immediately he wakes the names and knowledge of the time which has bred him, and in which he lives, and the same while a knowledge I had, as it were subconscious, of this present, this early life, which now I live so utterly alone. In my earliest knowledge of that place, I was a youth, 17 years grown, and my memory tells me that when first I waked, or came, as it might be said, to myself in that future, I stood in one of the embrasures of the last redoubt, the great pyramid of grey metal, which held the last millions of this world from the powers of the slayers. And so full am I of the knowledge of that place, that scarce can I believe that none here know. And because I have such difficulty, it may be that I speak over familiarly of those things of which I know, and heed not to explain much that is needful, that I should explain to those who must read here in our present day. For there, as I stood and looked out, I was less the man of years of this age than the youth of that, with the natural knowledge of that life which I had gathered by living all my 17 years of life there. Though, until that my first vision, I, of this age, knew not of that other and future existence, yet woke to it so naturally as may a man wake here in his bed to the shining of the morning sun, and know it by name, and the meaning of aught else. And yet, as I stood there in the vast embrasure, I had also a knowledge, or memory, of this present life of ours, deep down within me, but touched with a halo of dreams, and yet with a conscious longing for one, known even there in a half-memory as Mirdath. As I have said, in my earliest memory I mind that I stood in an embrasure, high up in the side of the pyramid, and looked outwards through a queer spyglass to the northwest. I, full of youth and with an adventurous and yet half-fearful heart. And in my brain was, as I have told, the knowledge that had come to me in all the years of my life in the redoubt. And yet, until that moment, this man of this present time had no knowledge of that future existence. And now I stood, and had suddenly the knowledge of a life already spent in that strange land, and deeper within me the misty knowings of this our present age, and maybe also of some others. To the northwest I looked through the queer spyglass, and saw a landscape that I had looked upon and pored through all the years of that life, so that I knew how to name this thing and that thing, and give the very distances of each and every one from the centre point of the pyramid, which was that which had neither length nor breadth, and was made of polished metal in the room of mathematics, where I went daily to my studies. To the northwest I looked, and in the wide field of my glass saw plain the bright glare of the fire from the red pit shine upwards against the underside of the vast chin of the northwest watcher, the watching thing of the northwest, that which hath watched from the beginning, and until the opening of the gateway of eternity, came into my thoughts as I looked through the glass. The words of Aesworth, the ancient poet, though incredibly future to this our time. And suddenly they seemed at fault, for I looked deep down into my being, and saw, as dreams are seen, the sunlight and splendour of this our present age, and I was amazed. And here I must make it clear to all that, even as I waked from this age suddenly into that life, so must I, that youth there in the embrasure, have awakened then to the knowledge of this far-back life of ours, seeming to him a vision of the very beginnings of eternity, in the dawn of the world. Oh, I do but dread I make it not sufficient clear that I and he were both I, the same soul. He of that far date, seeing vaguely the life that was, that I do now live in this present age, and I of this time beholding the life that I yet shall live. How utterly strange! And yet I do not know that I speak holy truth to say that I, in that future time, had no knowledge of this life and age before the awakening. For I woke to find that I was one who stood apart from the other youths, in that I had a dim knowledge, visionary as it were, of the past, which confounded, whilst yet it angered, those who were the men of learning of that age, though of this matter more anon. But this I do know, that from that time onwards my knowledge and assuredness of the past was tenfold. For this my memory of that life told me. And so to further my telling. Yet before I pass onwards, one other thing is there of which I shall speak. In the moment in which I waked out of that youthfulness, into the assured awareness of this our age, in that moment the hunger of this my love flew to me across the ages, so that what had been but a memory dream grew to the pain of reality, and I knew suddenly that I lacked, and from that time onwards I went, listening as even now my life is spent. And so it was that I, fresh born in that future time, hungered strangely for my beautiful one, with all the strength of that new life, knowing that she had been mine, and might live again even as I. And so, as I have said, I hungered, and found that I listened. And now, to go back from my digression, it was, as I have said, I had amazement at perceiving, in memory, the unknowable sunshine and splendour of this age breaking so clear through my hitherto most vague and hazy visions, so that the ignorance of Isworth was shouted to me by the things which now I knew. And from that time onward, for a little space, I was stunned with all that I knew and guessed and felt, and all of a long while the hunger grew for that one I had lost in the early days, she who had sung to me in those fairy days of light, and that had been in verity. And the especial thoughts of that age looked back with a keen, regretful wonder into the gulf of forgetfulness. But presently I turned from the haze and pain of my dream memories once more to the inconceivable mystery of the night land, which I viewed through the great embrasure. For no one did it ever come... Sorry, that's not what it's written. For on none did it ever come with weariness to look out upon all the hideous mysteries, so that old and young watched, from early years to death, the black monstrosity of the night land, which this, our last refuge of humanity, held at bay. To the right of the red pit there lay a long, sinuous glare, which I knew as the veil of red fire, and beyond that, for many dreary miles, the blackness of the night land, across which came the coldness of the light from the plain of blue fire. And then, on the very borders of the unknown lands, there lay a range of low volcanoes, which lit up, far away in the outer darkness, the black hills, where shone the 7 lights, which neither twinkled, nor moved, nor faltered through eternity, and of which even the great spyglass could make no understanding. Nor had any adventurer from the pyramid ever come back to tell us aught of them. And here, let me say, that down in the great library of the redoubt were the histories of all those, with their discoveries, who had ventured out into the monstrousness of the nightland, risking not the life only, but the spirit of life. And surely It is all so strange and wonderful to set out that I could almost despair with the contemplation of that which I must achieve, for there is so much to tell, and so few words given to man by which he may make clear that which lies beyond the sight and the present and general knowings of the peoples. How shall you ever know, as I know in verity, of the greatness and reality and terror of the thing that I would tell plain to all? For we, with our puny span of recorded life, must have great histories to tell, but the few bare details we know concerning years that are but a few thousand in all. And I must set out to you, in the short pages of this my life there, a sufficiency of the life that had been, and the life that was, both within and without that mighty pyramid, to make clear to those who may read the truth of that which I would tell. And the histories of the great redoubt dealt not with odd thousands of years, but with very millions. Aye, away back into what they of that age conceived to be the early days of the earth, when the sun, maybe, still gloomed dully in the night sky of the world. But of all that went before, nothing save as myths and matters to be taken most cautiously and believed not by men of sanity and proved wisdom. And I, how shall I make all this clear to you who may read? The thing cannot be, and yet I must tell my history, for to be silent before so much wonder would be to suffer of too full a heart, and I must even ease my spirit by this my struggle to tell to all how it was with me, and how it will be. Aye, even to the memories which were the possession of that far future youth, who was indeed I, of his childhood's days, when his nurse of that age swung him, and crooned impossible lullabies of this mythical sun, which, according to those future fairy tales, had once passed across the blackness that now lay above the pyramid. Such is the monstrous futureness of this which I have seen through the body of that far-off youth. And so back to my telling. To my right, which was to the north, there stood, very far away, the house of silence upon a low hill, and in that house were many lights and no sound. And so had it been through an uncountable eternity of years. Always those steady lights and no whisper of sound, not even such as our distance microphones could have discovered. And the danger of this house was accounted the greatest danger of all those lands. And round the house of silence wound the road where the silent ones walk. And concerning this road, which passed out of the unknown lands, nigh by the place of the abhumans, where was always the green luminous mist, nothing was known, save that it was held that, of all the works about the mighty pyramid, it was, alone, the one that was bred, long ages past, of healthy human toil and labour. And on this point alone had 1,000 books and more been writ, and all contrary, and so to no end, as is ever the way in such matters. And as it was with the road where the silent ones walk, so it was with all those other monstrous things. Whole libraries had there been made upon this and upon that, and many 1,000 million mouldered into the forgotten dust of the earlier world. I mind me now that presently I stepped upon the central travelling roadway which spanned the 1,000th plateau of the great redoubt, and this lay 6 miles and 30 fathoms above the plain of the Nightland, and was somewhat of a great mile or more across, and so, in a few minutes, I was at the southeastern wall, and looking out through the great embrasure towards the 3 silver fire holes that shone before the thing that nods, away down far in the southeast. Southward of this, but nearer, there rose the vast bulk of the southeast watcher, the watching thing of the southeast. And to the right and to the left of the squat monster burned the torches, maybe half a mile upon each side, yet sufficient light they threw to show the lumbered forward head of the never-sleeping brute. To the east, as I stood there in the quietness of the sleeping time on the 1000th plateau, I heard a far, dreadful sound down in the lightless east, and presently again a strange, dreadful laughter deep as a low thunder among the mountains. And because this sound came odd whiles from the unknown lands beyond the Valley of the Hounds, we had named that far and never-seen place the country whence comes the great laughter. And though I had heard the sound many and oft a time, yet did I never hear it without a most strange thrilling of my heart, and a sense of my littleness and of the utter terror which had beset the last millions of the world. Yet, because I had heard the laughter oft, I paid not overlong attention to my thoughts upon it. And when, in a little it died away into that eastern darkness, I turned my spyglass upon the giant's pit, which lay to the south of the giant's kilns. And these same kilns were tended by the giants, and the light of the kilns was red and fitful, and threw wavering shadows and lights across the mouth of the pit, so that I saw giants crawling up out of the pit, but not properly seen, by reason of the dance of the shadows. And so, because ever there was so much to behold, I looked away, presently, to that which was plainer to be examined. To the back of the giant's pit was a great black headland that stood vast between the Valley of the Hounds, where lived the monstrous night hounds, and the giants. And the light of the kilns struck the brow of this black headland, so that, constantly, I saw things peer over the edge, coming forward a little into the light of the kilns, and drawing back swiftly into the shadows. And thus it had been ever, through the uncounted ages, so that the headland was known as the headland from which strange things peer, and thus was it marked on our maps and charts of that grim world. And so I could go on for ever, but that I fear to weary, and yet, whether I do weary or not, I must tell of this country that I see, even now as I set my thoughts down so plainly that my memory wanders in a hushed and secret fashion along its starkness, and amid its strange and dread habitants, so that it is but by an effort I realize me that my body is not there in this very moment that I write. And so to further tellings. Before me ran the road where the silent ones walk, and I searched it as many a time in my earlier youth had I with the spyglass, for my heart was always stirred mightily by the sight of those silent ones. And presently, alone in all the miles of that night-grey road, I saw one in the field of my glass, a quiet, cloaked figure, moving along, shrouded and looking neither to right nor left. And thus was it with these beings ever. It was told about in the redoubt that they would harm no human if but the human did keep a fair distance from them, but that it were wise never to come close upon one, and this I can well believe. And so, searching the road with my gaze, I passed beyond this silent one, and past the place where the road, sweeping vastly to the southeast, was lit a space, strangely, by the light from the silver fire holes, and thus at last to where it swayed to the south of the dark palace, and thence southward still, until it passed round to the westward, beyond the mountain bulk of the watching thing in the south, the hugest monster in all the visible nightlands. My spyglass showed it to me with clearness, a living hill of watchfulness, known to us as the Watcher of the South. It brooded there, squat and tremendous, hunched over the pale radiance of the glowing dome. Much, I know, had been writ concerning this odd, vast watcher, for it had grown out of the blackness of the south unknown lands 1,000,000 years gone, and the steady growing nearness of it had been noted and set out at length by the men they call monstruacans, so that it was possible to search in our libraries and learn of the very coming of this beast in the olden time. And while I mind me, there were even then and always men named monstruacans, whose duty it was to take heed of the great forces, and to watch the monsters and the beasts that beset the great pyramid, and measure and record, and have so full a knowledge of these same that, did one but sway and head in the darkness, the same matter was set down with particularness in the records. And so to tell more about the South Watcher. 1,000,000 years gone, as I have told, came it out from the blackness of the south, and grew steadily nearer through 20,000 years, but so slow that in no 1 year could a man perceive that it had moved. Yet it had movement, and had come thus far upon its road to the redoubt, when the glowing dome rose out of the ground before it, growing slowly. And this had stayed the way of the monster, so that through an eternity it had looked towards the pyramid across the pale glare of the dome, and seeming to have no power to advance nearer. And because of this, much had been writ to prove that there were other forces than evil at work in the Nightlands, about the last redoubt. And this I have always thought to be wisely said, and indeed there to be no doubt to the matter, for there were many things in the time of which I have knowledge, which seemed to make clear that, even as the forces of darkness were loose upon the end of man, so were there other forces out to do battle with the terror, though in ways most strange and unthought of by the human mind, and of this I have more to tell anon, right after I let Joey in 1 second. Thought you might return. Yeah. I'm going to put my legs up here. Oh, I'm going to transport you over. Right. Well, okay, you do a big jump. Alright. Yes, we'll be back right after these few words. Thank you. That was a word from our sponsor, Joey. You good? Yeah, okay. Thank you for spiking the layup. I appreciate it. Right. More to tell anon. There we go. And here, before I go further with my telling, let me set out some of that knowledge which yet remains so clear within my mind and heart. Of the coming of these monstrosities and evil forces no man could say much with verity, for the evil of it began before the histories of the great redoubt were shaped, aye, even before the sun had lost all power to light, though it must not be a thing of certainty that even at this far time the invisible, black heavens held no warmth for this world. But of this I have no room to tell, and must pass on to that of which I have a more certain knowledge. The evil must surely have begun in the days of the darkening, which I might liken to a story which was believed doubtfully, much as we of this day believe the story of the creation. A dim record there was of olden sciences that are yet far off in our future, which, disturbing the unmeasurable outward powers, had allowed to pass the barrier of life some of those monsters and abhuman creatures which are so wondrously cushioned from us at this normal present, and thus there had materialized, and in other cases developed, grotesque and horrible creatures which now beset the humans of this world, and where there was no power to take on material form, there had been allowed to certain dreadful forces to have power to affect the life of the human spirit. And this, growing very dreadful, and the world full of lawlessness and degeneracy, there had banded together the sound millions, and built the last redoubt. There in the twilight of the world, so it seems to us, and yet to them, bred at last to the peace of usage, as it were, the beginning. And this I can make no clearer, and none hath right to expect it, for my task is very great, and beyond the power of human skill. And when the humans had built the Great Pyramid, it had 1,320 floors, and the thickness of each floor was according to the strength of its need, and the whole height of this pyramid exceeded 7 miles, by near a mile, and above it was a tower from which the watchmen looked, these being called the Monstruacans. But where the redoubt was built, I know not, save that I believe in a mighty valley, of which I may tell more in due time. And when the pyramid was built, the last millions, who were the builders thereof, went within, and made themselves a great house and city of this last redoubt. And thus began the second history of this world. And how shall I set it all down in these little pages? For my task, even as I see it, is too great for the power of a single life and a single pen. Yet to it. And, later, through hundreds and thousands of years, there grew up in the outer lands beyond those which lay under the guard of the redoubt, mighty and lost races of terrible creatures, half man and half beast, and evil and dreadful, and these made war upon the redoubt, but were beaten off from the grim metal mountain with a vast slaughter. And yet there have been many such attacks, until the electric circle was put about the pyramid and lit from the earth current, and the lowest half-mile of the pyramid was sealed. So at last there was a peace, and the beginnings of that eternity of quiet watching for the day when the earth current shall become exhausted. And at whiles through the forgotten centuries had the creatures been glutted time and again upon such odd bands of daring ones as had adventured forth to explore through the mystery of the nightlands. For of those who went, scarce any did ever return, and there were eyes in all that dark, and powers and forces abroad which had all knowledge, or so we must fain believe. And then, so it would seem, as that eternal night lengthened itself upon the world, the power of terror grew and strengthened, and fresh and greater monsters developed and bred out of all space and outward dimensions, attracted, even as it might be infernal sharks, by that even as it might be infernal sharks by that lonely and mighty hill of humanity facing its end, so near to the eternal, and yet so far deferred in the minds and to the senses of those humans, and thus hath it been ever. And all this, but by the way, and vague and ill-told, and set out in despair to make a little clear the beginnings of that state which is so strange to our conceptions, and yet which had become a condition of naturalness to humanity in that stupendous future. Thus had the giants come, fathered of bestial humans and mothered of monsters, and many and diverse were the creatures which had some human semblance, and intelligence, mechanical and cunning, so that certain of these lesser brutes had machinery and underground ways, having need to secure to themselves warmth and air, even as healthy humans. Only that they were incredibly inured to hardship, as they might be wolves set in comparison with tender children. And surely, do I make this thing clear? And now to continue my telling concerning the Nightland. The Watcher of the South was, as I have set to make known, a monster differing from those other watching things of which I have spoken, and of which there were in all 4. One to the northwest, and one to the southeast, and of these I have told. And the other twain lay brooding, one to the southwest, and the other to the northeast. And thus the 4 watchers kept ward through the darkness upon the pyramid, and moved not, neither gave they out any sound. Yet did we know them to be mountains of living watchfulness and hideous and steadfast intelligence. And so, in a while, having listened to the sorrowful sound which came ever to us over the grey dunes, from the country of Wailing, which lay to the south, midway between the redoubt and the Watcher of the South, I passed upon one of the moving roadways over to the southwestern side of the pyramid, and looked from a narrow embrasure thence far down into the deep valley, which was 4 miles deep, and in which was the pit of the red smoke. And the mouth of this pit was 1 full mile across, and the smoke of the pit filled the valley at times, so that it seemed but as a glowing red circle amid dull, thunderous clouds of redness. Yet the red smoke rose never much above the valleys, so that there was clear sight across to the country beyond. And there, along the further edge of that great depth, were the towers, each maybe a mile high, grey and quiet, but with a shimmer upon them. Beyond these, south and west of them, was the enormous bulk of the southwest Watcher, and from the ground rose what we named the eye-beam, a single ray of grey light which came up out of the ground and lit the right eye of the monster. And because of this light, that eye had been mightily examined through unknown thousands of years, and some held that the eye looked through the light steadfastly at the pyramid, but others set out that the light blinded it, and was the work of those other powers which were abroad to do combat with the evil forces. But however this may be, as I stood there in the embrasure and looked at the thing through the spyglass, it seemed to my soul that the brute looked straightly at me, unwinking and steadfast, and fully of a knowledge that I spied upon it. And this is how I felt. To the north of this, in the direction of the west, I saw the place where the Silent Ones kill. And this was so named, because there, maybe 10,000 years gone, certain humans adventuring from the pyramid came off the road where the Silent Ones walk, and into that place, and were immediately destroyed. And this was told by one who escaped, though he died also very quickly, for his heart was frozen. And this I cannot explain, but so it was set out in the records. Far away beyond the place where the Silent Ones kill, in the very mouth of the western night, was the place of the abhumans, where was lost the road where the Silent Ones walk, in a dull green luminous mist. And of this place nothing was known, though much it held the thoughts and attentions of our thinkers and imaginers. And Joey, for some said there was a place of safety, differing from the redoubt, as we of this day suppose heaven to differ from the earth, and that the road led thence, but was barred by the abhumans, and this I can only set down here, but with no thought to justify or uphold it. Later I travelled over to the northeastern wall of the redoubt, and looked thence with my spyglass at the Watcher of the northeast, the crowned Watcher, it was called, in that within the air above its vast head there always hung a blue, luminous ring, which shed a strange light downwards over the monster, showing a vast, wrinkled brow, upon which a whole library had been writ, but putting to the shadow all the lower face, all save the ear, which came out from the back of the head, and belled towards the redoubt, and had been said by some observers in the past to have been seen to quiver. But how that might be I knew not, for no man of our days had seen such a thing. And beyond the watching thing was the place where the silent ones are never, close by the great road, which was bounded upon the far side by the giant's sea, and upon the far side of that was a road which was always named the road by the quiet city, for it passed along that place where burned forever the constant and never-moving lights of a strange city, but no glass had ever shown life there, neither had any light ever ceased to burn. And beyond that again was the black mist. And here let me say that the valley of the hounds ended towards the lights of the quiet city. And so have I set out something of that land, and of those creatures and circumstances which beset us about, waiting until the day of doom, when our earth current should cease, and leave us helpless to the watchers of the abundant terror. And there I stood, and looked forth composedly, as may one who has been born to know of such matters, and reared in the knowledge of them. And, anon, I would look upward, and see the grey metalled mountain going up measureless into the gloom of the everlasting night, and from my feet the sheer downward sweep of the grim metal walls, 6 full miles and more to the plain below. And one thing, aye, and I fear me many, have I missed to set out with particularness. There was, as you do know, all around the base of the pyramid, which was 5 1/4 miles every way, a great circle of light, which was set up by the earth current, and burned within a transparent tube, or had that appearance, and it bounded the pyramid for a clear mile upon every side, and burned for ever, and none of the monsters had power ever to pass across, because of what we did call the air clog, that it did make as an invisible wall of safety. And it did give out also a more subtle vibration, that did affect the weak brain elements of the monsters and the lower men brutes, and some did hold that there went from it a further vibration of a greater subtleness, that gave a protecting against the evil forces, and some quality it had truly this wise, for the evil powers had no ability to cause harm to any within. Yet were there some dangers against which it might not avail, but these had no cunning to bring harm to any within the great redoubt, who had wisdom to meddle with no dreadfulness. And so were those last millions guarded until the earth current should be used to its end. And this circle is that which I have called the electric circle, though with failure to explain. But there it was called only the circle. And thus have I, with great effort, made a little clear that grim land of night, where, presently, my listening heard one calling across the dark, and how that this grew upon me, I will set out forthwith. But not this week, because that brings us to the end of the chapter, and where I'm finishing for tonight. Thank you for listening. So what do we think? How are we feeling? Also, hello, Stephen. Hello, welcome in. Pretend you didn't miss the first 90 minutes. Like, again, well, I say again, this would be your first time hearing it, because Parola came in earlier saying that they'd missed the first half, or sort of half of the first half of the stream, and this all feels very much like setup. You might feel lost in the future, but so far this is, I guess, Hodgson in the voice of the narrator, doing his best to set everything up for what is to come. And that setup is, you have a narrator who is big and strong and cool, and I'll address that in a second, who fell in love with a woman called Mirdath. And almost like a sort of Shakespearean prank gone wrong, the course of love did not immediately run smoothly for them due to a bit of a misunderstanding. But eventually they worked it out, smoothed things over, got married, and then she had a baby and died. But there was also, in that whole section, he sort of alluded to this almost like kind of spiritual timeless connection, like as if they felt as if they'd kind of known each other for centuries and like across different points in time. It's definitely not a degree of foreshadowing there, but she tragically died soon after childbirth, and that's when your narrator starts documenting these kind of waking dreams that he has, where, as he puts it, it's not like I'm dreaming, it's like when I dream I'm waking up into the body of someone else, and this someone else happens to be like a teenage guy some millions of years in the future when the sun has gone out. And then sets to describing this, like, I'm fascinated by this land that he is setting out, his own future life, basically. Yeah. Like the opposite of a past self. Yeah, exactly. It is, like, yeah, I will concede the way in which it is written is weirdly dry, and at times it feels like I don't know who among you has, like, flicked through the Bible, but you get those sections where it's just names, person begat person, person begat person, and you just get lists of names of things, of people, and like the longest written family tree, and it almost feels 5 pages of begats. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, like it almost feels a little bit like that, the way that it is being described in such a, like, dry, straightforward fashion. And it's almost like kind of where I'm equating it, where I'm taking it in my mind is almost like I'm comparing it to Lord of the Rings, and like the kind of thing that Tolkien solved by oh yeah, first I should take out the holy pin, now shall count to 3. Yeah, he uses, there are so many words. You get some of the vibes of the introduction of the holy hand grenade. Yes, exactly. Yeah, no, you got it, Perella. All good. Yeah, like it feels like that. There are, it's the describing of a thing, and then the reiteration and the repetition, because I guess to this narrator it's like, no, bro, you've really got to believe I was seeing some weird stuff. And that might be like a facet of the era, because this was written in like 1912. It is 100 and quick maths 14 years old, and so seems like more than that. Yes, also a purposeful stylistic choice. Yes, also that. But like I focus on the 1912 part because I'm like, I don't know what else from that era would have been doing, like, who else from that same time was writing stuff like this. And this isn't like there wasn't anybody, this is a genuine question. Like, I don't know how popular or prevalent fiction this kind of fantastical was then, but yeah, the actual, like, dryness of it, yeah, that feels, yeah, as you say, purposeful and stylistic. And where I sort of equate it to Lord of the Rings is like what Tolkien did to kind of, and to smooth that. He's the anti-Hemingway. Yeah, I feel like what Tolkien did to smooth that over is like assuming like the famous Lord of the Rings map that we all know and love. I'm assuming that was also included in like original releases, and just kind of got into the world and told it through the characters within it experiencing it, rather than having someone like meticulously note down every single thing that he's seeing and describe it. That feels a much more lively, much more interesting way to get to it. But yeah, I think this is Hodgson's choice for how to do this. And this is where, like, as I said out at the start, I'm fine with us having a discussion. Probably not right now, because we're one stream in, 2 chapters, and even there, like it did feel to me like the writing style shifted between the first and second chapter. The first one, it probably stood out to you. It did really stand out to me. Flashbacks to 10 pages of wallpaper description in Gormenghast. I've never read Gormenghast. I remember there was like a BBC adaptation of it or something years ago, and so I didn't really know what it was. And then it's only like recently I don't know why, I just like, what is Gormenghast even? I looked it up. I was like, oh, you know what? Actually, it kind of sounds like something maybe it can like a book that I would encounter at some point and go, hey, maybe I should read this. But now that you say 10 pages of wallpaper description, I'm like, maybe not. You can understand why there are abridged versions, you'll say that. Yeah, but like, damn it, I've lost what I was saying. Oh, the shift in writing between even the first and second chapter, and the thing that it brings sharply into my mind, and I don't actually know if this, no, you're good, if this rings true for anyone else, but way back when I was a wee lad in school and doing like, this would have been pre-GCSE English, just teaching child how to write, I remember getting corrected and told off by a teacher for starting a sentence with the word "and." It was a, no, you do not start a sentence with the word "and." You never do that. That is bad English. That's bad writing. You shouldn't do that. And he says starting a sentence with the word "and." I internalized that, and now, obviously, as an adult, I'm like, it's a tool. You don't say never. You teach people why, so that they know the rules and so that they can then use it as a tool when you want to break that. You were taught that in Swedish too? All right. And yeah, it's I can appreciate it as a, like, here is, again, like, explain it. Like, here is why it is bad. I'm not saying never do this, but you should understand why you shouldn't do it so that you can also know when you should. And what then, like, the first chapter of this really like sticks out to me because every other sentence starts with "and," which to me is like, this is again like how Hodgson has chosen to write this character. This is the specific, I guess, era of language in which he is choosing to set this narrator's character, and so therefore the style of communication that he has chosen to give him, I personally don't like it. It feels clunky and stilted, and it causes me to trip over a lot of the words and the phrasings, but it felt to me like, for the second chapter, when he's less writing in the past tense and frankly writing very much in the future sense, that there is a bit of a change. He still does it, but less so. So that's why I'm like, I'm interested to see where this goes. And I don't know, just like the actual, it is a very dry description of things, but the things that he's describing, I'm kind of fascinated to see what's going on. Like, if we're actually gonna go to these places, because presumably he's setting this all out so that then this protagonist can go, like, we've got 500 odd pages to go through, and it started on page 20 and we're on page 53, so we've got a long way to go, and I don't think it's just going to be a guy sat in a 7-mile high pyramid looking out at the four corners going, and there's a man, and there's a monster, and there's a thing. I'm expecting we're going to like get out into this world. Epic quest to go battle those watchers. Well, I think what it is an epic quest to go and find Mirdath in the future, and like to reconnect, which, you know, that's a good call to action. I want to know more about this place. I want him to get out there and actually see these weird things up close, and not necessarily to actually explain them. I like that you have these weird things that have like very simple, plain, straightforward names. You know, it's the road where the silent ones walk. And what other ones? Just the plane of blue fire. Just, I don't know. There is something that piques my interest in the simplicity of these descriptions. In that it's just, yeah, there's that place where that thing happens. We've been here for a very long time looking at them, and we have no idea what it is. It just sits out there constant. There is a beam of light that just shines into the eye of this thing that is looking at us. There is something over there that is like a series of towers. We think it might be a city. They have lights on all the time. We have been watching and documenting them for millennia. Those lights have not changed. That's interesting to me. Like, that intrigues me. But again, I do not wish to like tether us to this. Mrs. P has a long and gushing bit about books that drop you in media res and don't tell you anything. Just here's the world, let's go. Yeah, exactly. There is. I agree. And this feels like possibly the clunkiest way to do that, like the driest way to do that, because you have that. You have like, I am transported into the body of, like, mentally transported into the body of this 17-year-old me in the far distant future. Let's go. And almost the other book that it brings to mind is Anathem by Neil Stevenson, which is a book that I really, really enjoyed it. And it's also a very difficult recommend because, good Lord, is it boring as hell. But it also kind of needed to be really boring. That's sort of partly the point, in a really frustrating way. It's like you've kind of half written a book that doesn't want to be read and hidden some really neat ideas about narrative and the protagonist in this Neil Stevenson. And it's sort of an alternate Earth where things are sort of similar to what they are here, but a bit different, because otherwise it would be the same. And he does nothing to explain it to you, because all the characters in this world are of this world, and so they just talk about speedy captors and things, and you're like, well, what? Is it like a video camera? Right, okay. But and it's not just like we take a thing from our world and give it a different name. Isn't that funny? There's so much of that, and you have to like infer and figure out what things are from the way that characters talk about them and use them. and it's, again, it works. It's intentional. It's the point that you're kind of meant to feel sort of out of your depth and lost, and be like grasping for these straws to try and figure these things out and pull these threads together and understand the world. But it also means it's a really unfun book to put in someone's hand to say, read this. You've got to get most of the way through it before it will click into focus, and then you suddenly realize you're having a good time. I'm sorry. And so, yeah, like, I don't know. I'm intrigued. I'm very intrigued. It may also be boring. And so, yeah, I don't want to, like, talk down the book I've just read and you know, potentially committing to reading through. But I do want to be open with a conversation about, like, how are we feeling about this? And I think seeing that change between the first and second chapter, I am interested to see if it shifts again when things start to get moving, as I presume they will. Because, yeah, I'd like to give it a shot and see where we go. You were definitely thinking we're waiting for the bit where there's some reveal that some of these details are leftovers from the modern world, but we don't realise yet because they're described strangely. I feel like with how determined he is to set this, like, so far and removed in the future, I'm hoping it's not the case. I'm hoping that, yeah, like the city where the lights don't go out, or whatever it's called, I'm hoping that is something, like I was saying earlier about, like, my interest with sort of abstract megastructures that aren't for us, that aren't for people. I'm hoping that is something that to our, like, to our cognition, to us as humans, we look at that and go, well, it kind of has the shapes of a city and there's light, so I think it's a city. And then you get up to it and you look at it and go, this is not a city. This is categorically not that. It's actually kind of almost uncanny valley, like, putting me off because of how, like, the scale is all wrong. There's nothing that actually lines up with my, from all the way over there, sure, it looked like a city. Up close, absolutely not. I kind of want to get away from here. This is weird. That's what I'm hoping. That's where that's at. Also, the other thing, actually, I think, on the timeline of his writing, this was written after The House on the Borderland, which makes perfect sense. I had that thought when reading this, like, did you write that first and then sort of perhaps get taken by the idea and go, ooh, wait, I want to explore more of some imagined world that is like 1 million years in the future, when the sun has gone dark and everything is just weird and wrong and not like we know it now. And I mean, I don't know that is the thought process, but it makes sense. Yeah, exactly. Like, it's, yeah, definitely crossed your mind. Doesn't surprise you. Yeah, it absolutely tracks that, like, he wrote that first and then probably came back to the idea with a bit more gusto. A bit about the sun having gone out and everything. Yeah. Which, yeah, I don't know. I think I'm wrapping up. I think I'm bringing this to the end. But yeah, I want to, well, at least I'll pre-read for the next stream, which won't be next Saturday. I am away. And, you know, we'll see how we go with that, and that will at least give me an idea, and then collectively us an idea. There's this big sculpture called City by Michael Heidzer, which I'm kind of reminded of now. Ooh. Tell me more. And no worries, Prola. Thank you. And some other thanks as well, as always. Thank you for listening. Warsaw, I would recommend it. It's good stuff. Oh, Parola, by the way, I have now, finally, you'll be pleased to know, one knitted octopus. I knitted an octopus, but that's not a thing. JD, when I went down there for the stream on Wednesday, he went, "Ooh," and then disappeared, and then came back and proudly put a little knitted octopus into my hand. Crocheted, sorry, yes, apologies, crocheted octopus. And you will be pleased to know it hangs from my mic stand. The octopus that saves us. Yes, that's what an octopus is. Yeah, thank you for listening. This has been part 1 of The Nightland by William Hope Hodgson. I hope, yeah, I don't know. I think it's one that is just going to sit with me, and I'm going to think about it. And there is real worth in that. I like that. Doesn't always have to be like. Things can be bangers in different ways. There you go. That's my thought to leave you on. Yeah, thank you everybody. I'm not gonna. Just gonna drop this. What colour did I get? It is blue, and I immediately recognise the risk in me trying to describe a colour because someone is going to tell me that Sam, that is not blue. It's baby blue. That is how I would describe that. But yeah, I am going to go. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for appreciating the stream. Exactly, it's Bleen. Perfectly identifiable Bleen. And we will see you on the next one. Thank you all. Have a lovely whatever is left to you of the weekend. Goodbye.